Cleveland, Ohio, and the living room of Kathleen and James Bond. No, not that James Bond. How did they meet?
You want to take that one?
I'd love to take that one. I dated Kathleen's roommate in college and stopped dating her roommate and started dating Kathleen.
Sure, okay, I'll give you the other version. We met in college. I'll just skip that part. We met in college at Ohio University, and it was the late 60s, and I saw that there was a James Bond that was offering a ride to Akron, and I thought it was a joke. But I called him up, and the car was full, so I never got the ride. But we did meet, and the rest is history.
Just a year later, they began their marriage, their family, and Jim's career at Ernst & Young. In 1975, the company transferred Jim and Kathleen from Boston to Cleveland, where they raised their 2 sons, and Kathleen became involved in volunteer activities.
I coached girls basketball for 5 years at the Catholic grade school, and I had a great time doing that. And then I've done some other community projects, working for the Cleveland Orchestra, and all through that I was also volunteering when I could for the American Cancer Society. When we first moved here from Boston in 1975, I was asked, got the telephone call to be one of the door-to-door crusaders. And because there's been a lot of cancer in my family and certainly in Jim's, I said sure, and went door-to-door every year.
In 1992, cancer struck closer to home than Jim and Kathleen ever imagined.
My symptoms were just a dull backache that I had, and I thought, maybe we needed a new mattress, or I had strained a back muscle or something. But it was time for my annual company-required physical examination, which I had. And during that examination, a very diligent general practitioner noticed the fact that I had too much protein in my urine. He wouldn't let go of it. He kept running test after test after test until he found finally that I had this rare blood cancer that affects the bone marrow called multiple myeloma. And unfortunately, it has no cure. And we were devastated. I asked a hard question. I asked a young oncologist, how long do you think I'll live? And his response was a few months if you do nothing, a few years if you take some action. And I asked him, well, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? And he said, probably consider taking some time off and enjoying the short time you probably have left.
It is such a kick in the stomach you can hardly breathe. You cannot believe that you're hearing what you're hearing. It's just, your world changes. I think from then on, you never look at the world the same. It's completely different from then on. And after a diagnosis of cancer, when you hear something like, it's not curable, from that moment forward, you wish you could just turn the clock back. Give me that minute before we heard that.
This is Dr. Irwin Rose. Born in Brooklyn nearly 80 years ago, he has devoted his life to questions in basic research.
Well, I like to solve problems, and I felt if I could solve problems that were related to knowledge, to basic knowledge, that would be a useful way to spend my life.
In 1963, as a young researcher at Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia, Dr. Rose began receiving American Cancer Society research grants for his promising and intriguing work as an entomologist. In the 1980s, Dr. Rose, along with 2 young researchers in his lab, began to make discoveries about certain important proteins.
Well, for example, there's a protein called P53. It's called a tumor suppressor protein, and it's found to be low in tumors particularly. And so, for example, if you're going to get cancer, about 50% of the cancers have a low level of P53.
This discovery would have a profound impact on treating blood cancers like multiple myeloma, but that would take nearly 20 years. During the 1990s, Jim went through rigorous chemotherapy, but there were periods of remission during which Jim and Kathleen tried to prepare for the future. But chemotherapy failed, as they knew it would eventually. Jim had a bone marrow transplant of his own stem cells, which zeroed out his immune system, but certainly not their spirits.
At one point, Jim had 10 IV bags hanging and 5 pumps going, 2 IV poles, and amazingly, the one thing that I think the hospital probably, those nurses never will get over, is Jim was always walking up and down the halls, pushing his IV pumps.
A second stem cell bone marrow transplant bought them more time. So did the third, but
the cancer was so strong that the cancer overtook me again. I was running very high temperatures. I was unable to eat. I was puffing up. I was living day to day because of transfusions. And we had known about the national study that was going on, the clinical study. Did not know about the research leading up to it, but I knew that the numbers were good. Patients were showing, sick patients were showing good promise, good response rates.
We barely made it up there to Boston, and we get to Boston, and I had to call the hospital immediately because I was so worried about his condition. The doctor that answered the phone there was the head of the myeloma program, and it was Dr. Ken Anderson. And I explained to Dr. Anderson what was going on with Jim, and he said, I wish I could come over there right now and start giving Jim Velcade. But he said, I can't. I need to have you show up tomorrow at the clinic. And he said, by the way, did anybody tell you that your husband's study number is 007? And he said it was totally random, but he said he is the 7th patient in our study, and he said, I think it's good karma.
It worked like magic. The Velcade drove 99% of the cancer out of my body and turned our world around, and I resumed a normal life, and remission followed shortly. And I did not know until recently when Kathleen told me that the American Cancer Society, years if not decades earlier, had funded the research that led to the development of Velcade. That means everything to us. It's enabled us, me, to see my 2 sons get married, and to see a granddaughter, and to see so many other meaningful things that would not have happened if it hadn't been for his research and other people doing great things for cancer patients.